I've been sharing about my autistic experience on the internet now for, I'd say probably about a year and a half. Most of the feedback has been supportive. I've seen a lot of things from people saying how me sharing about my experience might help them feel less alone or just might help them understand themselves a little better. And those are all things that are my intention with sharing about my autistic experience online. And then there's also much fewer responses, but there's still many of them, of comments that are like, there's no way you can be autistic, or you don't look autistic, or I would have never assumed you have autism. And I would say that most of these sort of comments and feedback and things like that are mostly on the internet. In my life personally, I think part of the reason is because I feel, it sounds kind of weird, but I feel a little bit more comfortable sharing about my autism in spaces like this, like on YouTube, or on my Instagram and TikTok. Whereas, like, in real life, if I meet someone new, I don't immediately tell them that I'm autistic. And so I think that's probably why I see it more online as opposed to IRL. But these things used to affect me a lot, especially when I first got my autism diagnosis and I was really trying to figure out what it meant to me, how autism shows up for me specifically. And at that time, I felt really lost. I didn't really have any sort of strong self-esteem or confidence or self-love. Since then, I've definitely been working on a lot of those things, through therapy and then kind of just my own journey of self-discovery and self-compassion. And so they don't affect me as much now, but it still happens. And I know that I'm not the only one who this happens to, whether it is in online spaces, online comment sections, or even in real life. I think that a lot of times people's autism and or their autistic experiences are very easily dismissed, ignored, misperceived, misunderstood, and can often also be met with a bit of conflict. Like, people feel the need to be on the defense or just approach it in a negative way that really isn't helpful to anyone at all. And so I just wanted to talk about this a little bit today. And let's start with this. You don't look autistic. This is probably one of the most common things that I hear personally, again, mostly through the internet. And I think a big part of this is because for so long, the media and just what people outside of autism spaces and outside of people who know autistic people, they have perceived autism as something that it isn't, or they've perceived autism as a very, very small fraction of the vast autism spectrum. And the truth is that autism doesn't have one look. There isn't one specific look to autism. And so if you've seen autism portrayed in a TV show or a movie, or you've even just read about it, or you've maybe only met one or two autistic people in your life, that doesn't show exactly what autism is. It shows how it presents in one specific autistic person. And the truth is, and this is a quote that I like to say a lot, and I don't know exactly where it came from. If you're watching and please credit the person below so I can credit them, but it's that if you know one autistic person, you know one autistic person. You don't know the entire autism spectrum. And this goes for me too. I know quite a few autistic people in my life, and I've met quite a few actually over this past year, which has been great and has been awesome. Like, as I'm starting to learn about myself, that like it's kind of like opened this door to meet other people, people who were even like already in my circle that I didn't know they were autistic, or I didn't know that they were neurodivergent. But this goes for me too. Like, I don't claim to speak, when I talk about my autism, I don't claim to speak for everyone on the autism spectrum, and I don't claim to, or I don't make general statements about autism at all. I mostly speak from my own experience and from my observations from the people around me, and just from my own education and research and learning about autism. And this should go for everyone. Understanding that autism is a spectrum, and autism is not a spectrum of every single person. Autism is a spectrum of people who meet the diagnostic criteria for autism spectrum disorder. But within that, it presents in so many different ways. For me, I tend to have lower support needs than some other people on the autism spectrum. For the most part, I can care for myself. I can live independently. I run my own business. I'm able to provide for myself financially. And I'm also able to speak verbally. I'm able to communicate and articulate my thoughts and feelings pretty clearly. And all these things that I just listed are seen as not able to be done by any autistic person, according to media and to stereotypes. And this is not to say that there aren't autistic people who have challenges with these things, who need lots of support, even 24/7 support with these things that I just listed. And their experience is completely real and it's completely valid, and that is part of the autism spectrum. For me, I'm able to do all these things for the most part, and I'll add that in there. I'll get to that in a minute. And I also tend to, because of these more outwardly presenting aspects of myself, it feels like I can sort of hide my autism a little bit easier, or mask or try to like camouflage in as a non-autistic person when in social settings or when just like out there in the world. But what people don't see are the more hidden aspects of my autism, the more internal aspects of my autistic experience. These are things that include like my rumination, my perseveration, my extremely rigid brain, which makes it hard to do so many things, especially in this ever-changing world. What many people don't see are my sensory issues, especially because I tend to internalize them. I tend to try to hide them. I try to not make a big deal about them. What people don't see are the years that I spent trying to figure out how to have a dialogue, how to have a conversation with someone. What people don't see are my shutdowns. People don't see my meltdowns. I don't share these things on the internet because they feel really vulnerable, and I don't feel comfortable sharing these things. And also, when I'm in the middle of a shutdown, when I'm in the middle of a meltdown, or when I'm going through a period of autistic burnout, I'm not going to pick up my camera. That's the last thing I could even think of doing. I wouldn't even have the ability to do that in many of those cases. And because I don't have a lot of friends or a lot of people offline who I would interact with, those people wouldn't see that as well. What people don't see is the just the intricacy of like my internal experience, and I know it's hard like for me to express this and then for someone else to understand this, because like I have no idea what someone else's internal world is like, just as no one has an idea of what my internal world is like. But based on my observations, based on listening to other people, based on my like extremely detailed analysis of just like observing people around me as I grew up, because I felt so different, this was probably sort of like a defense mechanism, honestly. Just like observing the people around me, I think that it is pretty safe to conclude that what happens in my brain and in my body tends to be quite different than most other people. And it's like I said, it's hard to describe, and I wish I had more details to describe it, but it's like I'm always like taking in little details of everything and then like trying to put them together. I'm always curious about everything. It's like my brain never stops thinking, it never stops wondering about things, which can also lead down obsessive spirals, which can be really hard. And these are just a few aspects of the more hidden challenges of my autistic experience. And when it comes to like me being able to mask or to try to fit in social settings, this is something that I really struggle with, because I struggle, first of all, even knowing what to say in conversations. I struggle with like the dialogue, the back and forth. And when I do interact with other people, I mask to an extent. There's some times where I like try to act interested in what they're saying when I'm not really interested. I try to act more normal. And I think that this is something I'm continuously working on trying to undo, because it does have such detrimental consequences to not just like my energy, but also to like my mental health and even to like my physical health sometimes. And so what I'm trying to say here is that I'm an autistic person who may not present in a way that most people understand autism to be, because my outward presentation of myself is one that tends to be a little bit more masked. I tend to be a little bit more quiet. I tend to not put myself out there as much. I think that if I didn't do those things and I did put myself out there more, maybe my outward presentation of what people think autism should be might be more closely aligned with that. I'm not really sure. But autism is so much more than just the behaviors that other people observe. And I think that for far too long, for probably most of the time that autism has been discovered and has been researched, it's been looked at from the outside in, from observing behaviors of autistic people and trying to understand these behaviors from a non-autistic lens. And that can be really hard when a lot of these behaviors that most autistic people have can't be viewed necessarily through a non-autistic lens, because these behaviors are just coming from a deeply rich internal experience. And I'm not sure if this is making sense. I'm doing my best to articulate this in a way that can make sense. Let me try saying it a little bit shorter, just to try to get my point across. And it's that what people view of me from the outside doesn't show what is actually happening on the inside. And this is true for everyone. Like, we never know what someone else is going through, but it's especially true for autistic people because our internal experience is different, because our brains are different, the way we perceive the world is different, our senses are different, our thinking styles are different, the way our body works and operates is different. And so you can't say that someone doesn't look autistic. That doesn't make sense. Autism doesn't have a look. There's autistic stereotypes. There's the more common presentations of autism. There's the more apparent presentations of autism, especially for those with higher support needs or those who might communicate in a nonverbal way. Those things tend to be a bit more obvious to an external observer, as opposed to people like myself on the autism spectrum who can communicate verbally and who can sort of pass by as being neurotypical, although we are often judged and often ridiculed and bullied, especially in our younger years, for being different. But what people don't see is the internal experience of autistic people. And so you can't judge someone and say they don't look autistic, because that doesn't even make sense. It doesn't make sense at all, especially considering the fact that autism has as many presentations as there are autistic people. Even us on the autism spectrum, we all have different brains. We all have different interests. We have all different ways of expressing ourselves. We have different, just as every single human is different in the world, that's not an exception for autistic people. We all meet the autism diagnostic criteria. Our brain functions in a similar way to each other, but the way it presents and the way that we think and the way that we operate as our own individual people is different. And so either you're watching this and you can relate to what I'm saying of people maybe dismissing your autism or maybe not understanding your autism. And if that's the case, I want you to know that you're not alone in that. It is hard, especially when we're trying to be understood or trying to speak up about something. Maybe it's like an accommodation that we need or something, and we're met with resistance. That's really hard. That's happened to me before. Or maybe you're someone watching this from the outside in. Maybe you're not autistic yourself, but maybe you're just watching this video for whatever reason, maybe trying to learn more, which is amazing. I want to give credit to you for that. And so if that's the case, then just try to keep this like in the back of your mind, that you have no idea what someone could be going through, and you have no idea what someone's internal experience is, even if the way that it presents looks unlike what you would expect it to. And so this leads me to kind of my next thing, which is like the more dismissive things that people say. Like, I would have never assumed that you were autistic. Let's talk about that for a sec, because they're pretty much saying that, like, I guess the way that that's phrased is like they think autism might be like a bad thing, And then you're challenging those stereotypes and that ableism that they hold in their thinking style around autism. And so they're like, oh no, you can't be autistic. As if autism is a bad thing, as if all autistic people are the same, as if you can't be an autistic person who can do X, Y, or Z. And with all of this said, like, the main reason I wanted to make this video is because being met with this resistance and this defensiveness and this conflict around us being openly autistic, it just perpetuates that cycle of ableism that has been going on for a very long time. And I think the truth is that society has a hard time accepting and understanding anyone who's different, and that includes autistic people. But the first step to starting to understand those who are different is to try to learn a little bit more. I think when people don't know much about something, it scares them, especially if that thing is different, if it challenges their thinking, challenges their beliefs, challenges what they think they know. They get scared and they get fearful, and that's when they put on a defense. But that does no one good. That doesn't do that person any good, because it leaves them ignorant. It leaves them in this state of fear that is unnecessary. And then for us, as talking about autistic people in this case specifically, it leaves us feeling misunderstood, which we already feel most of the time. It leaves us feeling like we can't be ourselves for whichever reason. And none of that is good. So I wish the world was more understanding and more inclusive, and I know that it's not. But I think that we can get there. I think that we can get there with more education. I think we can get there with more people being openly themselves, and in this case, more openly autistic. I'm going to continue doing my part, and there's many people out there who are also doing their part. And I guess my intention, my prayer for society and humanity in general, and this is not just exclusive to what I'm talking about in this video. It covers a lot of things that are happening in the world right now, is that we can all just like take a breath, recognize that being different is okay. Being different is actually natural. It's normal. And that we need to accept these differences in each other to truly live a life that's free, a life that's free of judgment, but more importantly, a life that's free for us, so we can live more joyfully, live more peacefully, and live more authentically. And so I hope some of this resonates with you. And I just want to thank you for watching this video, and just kind of think about today, how can you be less judgmental and be more free?